I'm Jenny Carlson.
I'm Barry Trammell. Welcome to the Jenny and Barry Show.
The Thunder's playoff winning streak is over, felled by the Mavs 119-110 on Thursday night. The series is tied as it moves to Dallas.
So, what issues arose in Game 2 for the Thunder? And what was there to like? We'll talk about all that and much more.
But first, we want to say thanks to these sponsors for supporting the Jenny and Barry Show. MidFirst Bank, Next Gen Roofing, Two Fellas Movers, the Oklahoma Ford Dealers Association. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. And hey, if you haven't subscribed to our show yet, do that on YouTube. Just hit that subscribe button. It's easy and it helps us a lot. So subscribe today. Well, Barry, let's start here. Welcome back. You have arrived back into playoff madness after some time overseas. How are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. I mean, silly me. I didn't see this Thunder team coming, so I scheduled a trip to Ireland for the first week of May, which means I missed, I missed 3 playoff games, the New Orleans closeout, and then first 2 games of the Dallas series. Got home last night about 9:30 and got caught up watching on television, but ready to go and get going in the Thunder playoff run. But until last night, they in Minnesota were the rage of the NBA. And of course, Luka Doncic put a stop to that in Game 2.
Yeah, it was a heck of a night by Luka for sure. But, obviously 5 straight wins to start the playoffs, this young Thunder team. Did people think this was just going to be easy? I mean, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are on the other side, Barry. I mean, we knew that this was going to be a series with some really tight games. We got the first one on Thursday night. Was this just a matter of time before we saw a really close game like this with those 2 superstars on the other bench?
Oh, yeah. The idea that the Thunder was just going to run roughshod over Dallas, that was silly. This is, we're watching the Celtics, the best team in the NBA this year. What'd they have? 66 wins, I think it was, 67, whatever it was. And, and they lost one by blowout to Miami in the prequel last night. They get whacked by Cleveland. So
at home in Boston.
At home, it just happens. Yeah. Now that's no real sign that that Dallas is the inferior team. Heck, Dallas is a potent team. But we got lured to sleep a little bit. The Thunder's last loss was April 5th, that game at Indiana. That's a month ago. I mean, the Thunder literally went a month and 4 days without losing. Now, had a lot of time off, the week before the playoffs, the time between the Pell series and the Mavericks series. So it wasn't a 19-game winning streak. But still, we got a little bit lured to sleep. This Thunder team is not a juggernaut. It's a really good team. It's the number 1 seed in the West, but they're eminently beatable, and Dallas did it in Game 2.
Yeah, a 10-game winning streak is what the Thunder had before they lose on Thursday night. Had they got to 11, I think that would have been the longest winning streak in the NBA this entire season. So clearly an impressive run, even at 10 games. So, a masterful stretch for the Thunder. Really performed well in a lot of those games, and frankly had some moments when they performed well in that Game 2 loss. I mean, Dallas kind of kept building the lead and the Thunder kept fighting back. So, I think the way that the Thunder responded is something we can talk about positives here in a minute. But, with Kyrie, with Luka, and they've got a really nice supporting cast, not as deep a supporting cast as the Thunder. But, we saw PJ Washington go off. We saw a good stretch by Tim Hardaway Jr. We'll talk about all that. But, this is, like you said, Barry, this is a good team. The Dallas is not some pushover. They're a good quality team. So, yeah, this was not going to be easy. And as you mentioned earlier, leading the way, Luka Doncic, masterful. He was 29 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists. The complaining, we can talk about the complaining. Because frankly, Barry, I think it might be working a little bit. There were some phantom moments of fouls out there on Luka. He pushed Lou Dort down at one point, and Lou Dort draws the foul. But we can talk about that in a minute, because Luka, he deserves to be celebrated for a great game. Just a night when he was really impactful on the court for the Mavs.
Yeah, he was. And, I don't like complaining any more than anybody else does. Luka only got 2 foul shots last night, so you'll take that anytime because he goes into any game wanting 22. So, the Thunder will take that any game. But you can live with Luka going off. Irving and Luka combined for 38 points. That's a Thunder blueprint for winning. P.J. Washington's monster night is what killed the Thunder. Dallas scored 119. They had 99 through 3 quarters. They hadn't allowed more than 95 in any playoff game this season.
Right.
And this was a defensive step back, I thought, for the Thunder. So that's what Mark Daigneault needs to do is figure out what the Mavericks did to get all those open threes. They make 18 of 37. Tim Hardaway got hot there in the second half. P.J. Washington makes 7 of 11. And that's what Josh Green goes 3 of 5. That's not sustainable, but it is replicable. And I mean, the Mavs aren't going to do it every night, but they might do it again. So you got to figure out what were the defense's problems that led to those open threes, even for the marginal players.
Yeah. Corner threes, that's a hallmark of this Mavs offense. They're going to get corner threes, but looks like the Thunder needs to defend that better. That's obviously the sweet spot for 3-point shooters, shorter over there. So guys want to get to that spot. They camp guys out there. If they're gonna hedge away, if they're gonna be a little bit closer to the restricted area, the paint area, they're gonna have to keep an eye on those guys because that's where a lot of those open shots are coming from. And obviously, PJ Washington, if we want to call that the PJ Washington game, I wouldn't be opposed to it because he was really good. 7 3-pointers by him, just an unexpected explosion offensively by him. But Barry, in the third quarter, this is probably a little underappreciated. Third quarter, Luka goes out with about 6 minutes to go. And the Thunder bench, we know, has been really good and, has I think is a difference maker in this series because the Mavs just don't have a ton of depth. But while Luka's on the bench, Tim Hardaway had 4 consecutive possessions where he scored. It was sort of Jalen Williams from game 1-esque. And instead of being able to cut into the Mavs lead, the lead was sustained and I think even grown a little bit while Luka was on the bench. Those are the types of things the Thunder has to take advantage of moments like that because Luka is going to come back and he is going to perform. I thought he was really good distributing as much as anything. SGA matched Luka's offensive production, actually bypassed it. I think SGA had 32 last night. So, you can sort of go mano-a-mano with the superstars, with the MVP finalists, but if he's going to distribute, Luke is going to distribute like he did last night. That's going to help the Mavs cause. So I think that, yes, Luke is going to score. Kyrie will probably have a night where he doesn't struggle. He struggled the first 2 games, at least scoring wise. I got to think a moment is coming for him where that changes. But to me, Barry, it's the threes. All the Mavs threes, like I said, 7 from PJ Washington. How does the Thunder turn that around?
Well, I mean, they gotta do a better job on closeouts. They got to do a better job on the sort of the feel for the defense when a guy's, when the Thunder doubles, they double Doncic a lot. He found the open guy. You got to know, when to double, when to not, when to hedge, when one guy's sort of covering 2 players on the other side of the court, which one to lean towards. But PJ Washington really showed him something. It made me think of last April. I think it was in an April game. The Thunder's fighting for playoff positioning down the stretch of last season, trying to make the play-in. Ended up making the play-in, but Charlotte, which was just 26 and 51 at the time, came in 5 games left in the regular season. P.J. Washington scores 43 points at Paycom Center. And he makes 16 of 24 shots, 5 of 9 from 3.
Yeah.
And the woebegone Hornets beat the Thunder 137-134. Yeah. So they knew P.J. Washington had this in them. The Dallas remade its team at the trade deadline, getting Daniel Gafford from Washington, big inside presence. He's hurt the Thunder. And then P.J. Washington. The Thunder got Gordon Hayward, and frankly, it's clear that Dallas got the upper hand in the dealings with Charlotte because Hayward's not really helping the Thunder at all. So those two guys have really come up big for the Mavericks down the stretch of this season, and that is showing in this series, particularly last night.
Yeah, and I know that, I think that the Thunder will have to look a little bit at, their defensive spacing. I know part of the reason you mentioned Gafford, Derek Lively is also in there for the Mavericks. I think there's the concern of the pick and roll of the lob game. We saw it a little bit in game 2, not very much in game 1. But I understand the trepidation. You want to make sure that they don't get that going, because that's a whole other animal that once it's on the train's on the tracks and rolling, it can be hard to get that slowed down. I think the Thunder's done a pretty good job of that, but they're giving up a lot of those threes. And so it's just going to have to be, maybe there's an adjustment there. We saw the Thunder go double big, for them, big lineup with Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams, Arkansas's Jalen Williams, a couple of times in game 2. And those two guys seem to play pretty well together. I think Mark Daigneault was pretty happy with it, and the results would say so too. But, they're just going to have to figure out, how to get out and get a hand in some shooters' faces a little bit more. Those 3-point shots, you can't have that kind of percentage like the Mavs did in game 2 and expect to offset that. That's going to be a hard road to hoe if you're going to have to try to come back from that kind of 3-point shooting percentage. So definitely an area that the Thunder will have to adjust to. And that's part of the playoffs. We haven't necessarily seen, Barry, with all the wins that the Thunders have had. We haven't necessarily had to see, what does Mark Daigneault do? What does his coaching staff do? What are the adjustments? This is one of those times. I'm sure there have been adjustments, not as noticeable because they have been winning. But now that they've lost, what are those adjustments? It'll be fascinating, I think, to see, because this is the first time Mark Daigneault and his staff are faced with this proposition of a loss. And what do? You don't want to over-adjust, but, I think that's been one of the things in the past, whether it was Scott Brooks or Billy Donovan, those two guys were pretty darn good at adjustments in playoff series. So how does Mark Daigneault do? I tend to think he's going to do fine because everything else they've done great at. But this is really the first time playoff adjustments. What do they do heading into game 3?
Yeah, and there's two major ways you adjust. One is strategy, and the other is personnel.
Yeah,
and Billy was pretty good. Now Scotty, I thought had some blinders on when it came to that. Notably in the 12 NBA Finals. He refused to adjust the rotation. Kendrick Perkins stayed on the court way too much, and the Thunder just got out-athleted by the Heat. I don't think Daigneault will do that. We saw the start of the second half with Wiggins starting. That was a big thing. I would like to see more of that. I'd like to see no Hayward at all. He's come in midway through the first quarter of each of the first 2 games, but he hasn't played much. 7 minutes game 1, 4 minutes game 2, hadn't done much at all. He's just sort of out there biding time. So we've reached a point in the season where that biding time doesn't get it done. It's a street fight, and all hands on deck. And somebody like Wiggins, he played okay last night. He was spectacular in game 1. It's interesting to me that Daigneault has not used Wiggins as a replacement for Giddey much in the lineup. He's more apt to go with Isaiah Joe or even Cason Wallace than Wiggins, but he did start the second half and went really good. Thunder went from a 6-point deficit to take the lead. Ended up when it was a 77-77 tie when he adjusted the lineup midway through the third quarter. But Wiggins had done his job. I think we'll see more of that. You don't have to start Giddey, I don't think. I mean Wiggins. You don't have to start Wiggins. Maybe for chemistry reasons. But I would like to see more of the Wiggins with the starting unit.
Yeah, and I know, what you said about Wiggins. I think, obviously he comes in handy defensively, but it feels to me in this series, Barry, that the Josh Giddey minutes, the offense gets sticky. And, whether that's how Dallas is guarding, how they're adjusting, I'm not sure what the answer to the why is, but the offense just gets sluggish when Giddey is out there. And so I don't think defensively he's necessarily doing anything terrible, Josh Giddey. I think he's been fine defensively. Yeah. But offensively, when games are going to come down to a possession or two, it's just really hard to see 2, 3, 4, 5-minute stretches of the offense just really hit a lull and not move like it does with Isaiah Joe or Aaron Wiggins or whoever you want to put in there off the bench. So I think that offense just getting sluggish, getting slow. There's a time for Josh Giddey. I mean, we saw him have a monster game in game 4 of the first round. So, there's times when he's going to be a big part of this team. But this series just doesn't feel like a lot of Josh Giddey time. So to me, it'll be fascinating to see how his minutes go as this series progresses.
Dallas this season sort of pioneered the idea of putting your center on not Holmgren, but Giddey.
Right.
Just playing off, helping clog the lane, protect the rim, those kinds of things. And a lot of people mirrored that strategy as the season went on. Giddey went through a pretty rough stretch after the first of the year. But he rallied late in the season, was very good in March, and as you said, in the Pelicans series, was just fine. So I think it's a case of the Thunder's going to have to adjust to that, and we'll just have to see what Daigneault wants to do. I think if Giddey's making his shots, the Thunder's very hard to guard, but he's not a natural-born shooter. What we've seen in the playoff in the New Orleans series in March was atypical. If he can replicate that, then most of the Thunder problems are solved. But last night he was a negative. Yeah. He comes in midway through the third quarter, didn't start the second half, comes in midway through the third quarter and looked uneasy and makes a bad read with SGA cutting and turnover, and away we go. Yeah. So yeah, it's not gone great for Giddey. This might be a series where Wiggins and Joe need to play a lot more.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think Wiggins played 23 minutes in game 1, and frankly, if he would have played another 10 or 12, it would have been fine by me. I don't know if he could have got that many minutes out of him, but he was masterful, and I think in a longer run, he got more comfortable. So that was exciting to see for the Thunder. All right, as this series gets ready to head to Dallas, Thunder goes on the road now having lost home court. They need to try to rally to win one of these road games. Maybe not one of these, but they're going to have to win in Dallas at some point if they want to win this series. So through 2 games, if you're Mark Daigneault, what's at the top of your biggest concern list as this series flips over to Dallas?
Well, I would try to turn up the defensive intensity. The Mavericks they're not a high turnover team. I think the Mavericks only had, was it 10 turnovers?
10, yep. I think it was 10 and 10 last night.
Yeah, so you need to get that up because that's how you beat teams. If you're the Thunder, is with your defensive intensity, they just completely took New Orleans apart with that regard. So, put the pressure. They've done a great job on Irving, done a great job on Doncic as far as I'm concerned. But try to make those other guys, Derek Jones, when he's handling the ball, when Washington's handling the ball, when Hardaway comes in or Exum, make those guys cough it up more. You turn those 10 turnovers into 15 turnovers, and it's a different game last night. So to me, that's it. This wasn't the Thunder's been playing great defense in this postseason. Get back to that mentality. Some people say, "Hey, Thunder's a young team, had a blowout win in game 1, might have let down a little bit, not cognitively, but just subconsciously. Maybe, I don't know, but perhaps the game last night is a message to the Thunder themselves that, hey, this is a dogfight. We got to be ready every night."
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think they're learning as they go. And you mentioned the turnovers. I actually asked Mark Daigneault about the turnover numbers before the game last night, before game 2, because they did win the turnover battle in game 1, got a lot more possessions because of it. I think it was 15-9 or something like that, maybe 15-6. I think they won it by a pretty sizable margin. So clearly that was a big part of game 1. And I asked him, is there a number that you've seen that if your team gets to it, if you can get, the other team to turn it over 12 times, or if you can win the turnover battle by 5, or, some sort of analytic that you need to get to. And he wouldn't cop to that. I'm sure the Thunder has analytics for everything. So they probably do have some sort of magic numbers that they're aware of, but they did not get it in game one. Didn't seem as active in the passing lanes, didn't seem as disruptive that way. And if you can get those turnovers, you can win the transition battle with the young legs that the Thunder has. I thought they got out and ran a lot better in game one. They need to get back to that, easier baskets that way. So, yeah, I think the turnovers are really important. And this is just a concern from the standpoint of sort of you feel like it's coming at some point. I feel like Kyrie Irving's going to go off at some point, Barry. I mean, he's been relatively quiet scoring wise, which I think the Thunder's done a really good job on him defensively. He's gotten the ball to shooters. He's working it well as can be expected. But this is a guy that can score 35, 40, 45. It's kind of, if you're the Thunder, you almost have to feel like there's a Kyrie stretch coming that could really be hard to contain. So that's not something that you can sort of say, well, it's going to happen and this is how it's going to go. But I've just got that sort of looming sense of at some point Kyrie's going to have a stretch where he looks unstoppable. Here's
feathering the cap to the Thunder. Irving's one of the great finishers in the history of the NBA. Maybe the best ever. A guy scoring around the basket in terms of driving in, little guy, able to produce. Thunder's mostly kept him from doing that.
Yeah.
He's not even trying it much. They're keeping him out of the lane. When he's gone in the lane, he hasn't been effective. If they can just do that, if they can just keep that up, whatever happens outside, live with it. But the job they've done on Irving, primarily Santa Clara Williams, has been exemplary. And if he can keep that up, then I think that's a really good sign for the Thunder. The other thing about it is they're wearing out Doncic. I mean, to his credit, he had a monster game last night, but he also was worn out. He's not in great health. He's not in great shape. He's constantly dragging. He's constantly injured. And a good thing for the Thunder is this series is picking up speed, every other game type situation. And Saturday, game 3 is a quick turnaround. It's a mid-afternoon game, 2:30, so it's not 48 hours between final gun and first tip. I think it's 41 hours. So that's to the Thunder's benefit because Lou Dort does not stop. He's always coming, and so he's going to be fully fresh. He's one of those cell phones that retains its battery pretty dang good. So I like what they're doing with Doncic, making him work. He didn't produce game 1. He did produce game 2, but continue to make him work, and that's going to help the Thunder.
Well, you just mentioned some positives there, Barry. I don't know if you feel like those are some of the biggest positives coming out of the loss on Thursday night. It feels like to me that maybe the Thunder's starting to figure out the rotations that work best. Yes, I know that Josh Giddey is still out there. Yes, I know that Gordon Hayward's still playing, hit and miss minutes. And, it's a little bit head scratching. Mark Daigneault, I think he would explain it as, I don't know how this series is going to unfold. I don't know who I'm going to need. I don't want him to have not played for multiple games. So that would be his argument. But I think we may see less and less and less of those guys because you can clearly see when Isaiah Joe's out there, when Aaron Wiggins is out there. I mean, Wiggins starting the second half. I mean, I think that was a sign that there's recognition of what works best for this team against the Mavs. So I think that's going to be a fascinating side note to watch. Maybe not a side note, maybe a big note. But then I think you've also got to think it's a positive the way the Thunder reacted again and again in that game last night, because the Mavs continued to build double-digit leads multiple times, at least 3 or 4 times, and the Thunder kept cutting into it, kept coming back. And so I think that that fight, that tenacity, we've seen it, but in the playoffs, it can be tough because the stakes are so much higher. So for them to have done that in a situation where they were pushed and they didn't back down, they didn't lose by 20, they didn't have a big blowout loss. They were still in it until the final minutes. So I thought that was a positive too. And then just a side note, this series is getting spicy, Barry. I mean, we saw it with the fans getting on Luka getting on the fans, Kyrie getting on the fans getting on Kyrie. So this series is getting some fire in it, which this new era of the Thunder, hasn't really established much in the way of rivalries. Rivalries are born in the playoffs. It's going to be fascinating to see how things are between these two sides as this series rolls along.
Yeah, and this ought to be a rivalry. I mean, 200 miles apart, Oklahoma City and Dallas. Easy I-35 series. Already played 3 times in the playoffs, 11, 12, and 16, and once in a Western Conference Finals. So, our old pal Anthony Slater for The Athletic wrote about sort of the spirited nature of that 16 series when Rick Carlisle was coaching the Mavericks and all kinds of things going on. Luka Doncic was just a gleam in Mark Cuban's eye. If you need reason to hate the Mavericks, Mark Cuban, the only owner who voted against the move from Seattle, 16 years ago. So lots to spice up this series, but it comes down to just what happens on the court, and the fans. I tend to recommend to fans to not get to ride the opponents all that heavily. For one thing, it doesn't work. It often backfires. I remember our old pal Darnell Mayberry wrote, and this was a Maverick game. I think it was a regular season game. Maybe it was a playoff game. When Jason Terry was one of Dirk Nowitzki's sidekicks.
Yep.
And we sat down there close to the court back in those days, and one particular Thunder fan was riding Jason Terry the whole game, and Jason Terry goes off in the last 3 minutes and sort of stuck it to the fan and the Thunder. So I don't know that stuff works. I mean, if it's fun for you, I don't know why yelling at another human being is all that much fun. I do it about once a year, and I feel terrible after I do it. So I don't recommend it. But these guys respond well to that kind of stuff. I mean, Luka Doncic, he's from Slovenia, and he's sort of seen a lot of stuff in his young life. So I don't think you're going to get under his skin.
No, I would think not. Although if this series goes 6 or 7 games, which seems pretty likely, I think it's just going to add more spice. But you're right. This is a rivalry that really isn't. I mean, it's not really that much of a rivalry. I think because at the time, and 16 could have been when it really, germinated. Thunder had a lot of other sort of natural rivals out there, more natural rivals out there from other playoff experiences. So when it comes to things that really get fans fired up, players fired up, Dallas really wasn't it. And I don't know if I don't get the sense the tension on the court is that high, but it's going to be interesting to see as this series goes on. Obviously, these one-on-one battles with Lou Dort guarding Luka, Jalen Williams guarding Kyrie, some of these guys that are having big moments. Does any of that get bubbly up? Is there spice out there on the court like we've seen it coming out of the stands? Yet to be determined, but the series rolls on to Dallas Saturday afternoon, 2:30 tip-off. We'll have all sorts of coverage of that game and the rest of the playoffs, so stay with us for that. But that's all the time we've got now. Again, you can go to Sellout Crowd for columns, videos, podcasts, as well as find all our content on our mobile app. You can download that today. If you want our content sent straight to your inbox, just sign up for our newsletters. It's free and it's easy. Do that on selloutcrowd.com. Opt in. We'll get all that content to your inbox. If this happens to be your first time hearing or watching us, be sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a review. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.